Thomas, welcome. Now, you really are something of a hybrid character, aren't you? So working at the intersection of marketing, sustainability and innovation as both author and presenter. You've also advised companies from Fortune 500 businesses to startups. But what underpins everything you do, though, is that you put planet and people first. Now, our conversation today focuses principally on the aviation and travel retail market sectors. Can I first ask you for some general observations?
Yes, and I agree. It's almost like I have these two hats on. I feel stuck between my past in marketing, advertising, and the world of sustainability. So obviously there's this sort of sometimes schizophrenic mindset, and I think when we talk about travel and aviation, I think that is probably the state of the union right now, is this schizophrenic idea about, wait a moment, we're an industry that for a lot of people at the moment is representing fossil fuels, it's representing bad consciousness with things like what they call flygskam, flight shaming in Sweden. And yet, on the other hand, it's also something that I think all of us connects with something that's pleasurable, our little time off, maybe in context of business meetings, our lifeline, our livelihoods. So it's sort of an interesting period of time to look at that industry because it's at a crossroad, and it's really, really important right now that it figures out what direction to take from now on.
So, in your view, who is doing well for sustainable activity when you actually consider any airports and airlines?
Oh, they're all doing they're all doing shit. Sorry about the language, but they are. I mean, I think the challenge is that you're trying to change course of an oil tanker, in fact, and it's going to take time. The challenge is so multifaceted. It touches government regulation. It touches on the consumer pressure, and so it's not an easy time to navigate. And so what I, for example, comparing to an industry that's probably been a little bit earlier to adapt, the car industry, they've had their fair share of a tough journey. And so I think there's no way of ignoring the pressure. I think it's about being truthful about how difficult this really is to create the much needed change. I do see experiments right now, airlines like KLM that are obviously, going out there and communicating that, wait a moment, actually, maybe it's not a good idea to jump in an airplane every time. If you want to travel a short distance, maybe try thinking about something else. Some countries are pretty well functioning rail service. Maybe you've got to think about that. So I think in many aspects it's at this time going to be about doing less bad. So there's no reason to try and put lipsticks on a pig. This is not an industry that represents anything great in this space, but how can you be a little bit honest about the challenge going forward and how tremendously difficult it is? And also, being honest about the fact that in a lot of countries, airports are an engine of prosperity, serving communities, livelihoods. I'm calling in for Copenhagen today. Copenhagen Airport, I think, is one of the biggest employers in Denmark.
Yes.
So sustainability, and that's the challenge. Sustainability is not just about green and climate. It's also about social issues. It's about all these other things.
Absolutely.
So it's tough. It's tough to navigate in this space. But I think first and foremost, honesty about the challenge is key to success in this.
Well, you mentioned Copenhagen, and they are probably one of the leaders of the pack in terms of taking being forerunner of sustainable actions, who else might you consider as in the frame of being industry leaders from an airport perspective?
For me, a lot of the things I look at, and this is probably also sort of a good frame to put over all this, is in fact that I see this shift away from this just being about pledges and impact, etc. I mean, if we look at Heathrow, they can talk about the impact they have, about the programs they do in terms of energy, etc., etc., etc. But by the end of the day, I think this is also about understanding the opportunity that this can also open up for airports, for travel retail. Because yes, we can look at this as a responsibility. It's extremely difficult and challenging to deal with. You have to go on that journey if you haven't started. But I think the possibility that this also entails is really to create and position yourself in a completely different space. I mean, if you look at Copenhagen, for example, they've sort of recreated the space and the airport experience. So much smaller sort of outlets. They got H&M Arcade there, which is a mix of retail and food. It's sustainable. You get a different sort of experience. So for me, one of the key questions and one of the things I keep telling, whether it's retail or airports, is how do you empower your customers to take a more sustainable choice? How do you give them those options? Because then it suddenly becomes much more of an experience. I mean, if you're in Schiphol, you immediately notice some of those green oases that they build up. You can say if it's gimmicky to jump on a little, bike and power your iPhone. But, by the end of the day, our legs are tired. We've been on an airplane. It's not a bad idea. Is it gimmicky? Maybe, but it still sticks. You remember that little thing in the airport. When you leave the airport, you know that you're not stepping into your usual sort of fossil fuel powered car, but there's only, electric vehicles, Teslas, etc. So I think it's those small things that excites me in this space as well. Plus, still there's a lot of opportunity to create a retail environment that's not just driven by, luxury brands, but actually gives people a sort of a different experience. Because by the end of the day, airports are your first gateway into any country. It's your first experience. Is that door opening up when you touch down? What is it? What experience are you getting? And so if you have a country, as most countries do these days, even Saudi Arabia have quite ambitious sustainability pledges, how do you communicate that? How do you align that in an airport environment? So when I touch down, I get a sense of, hey, wait a moment, maybe this is a country that's on a pathway towards green transition.
So let's just move on and talk about travel retailers and brands. Now, as you know, travel retail is like the lifeblood of many of the same airports we've been talking about. And arguably, they could be operational in providing criteria to their brand suppliers to say you have to think about climate smart packaging. You've got to think about more sustainable, more greener type products which the consumers are looking for. What's your view on that?
To be honest, I think for the most part, travel retail is a really sad experience, and even calling it experience is maybe giving them too much credit. Having an opportunity to engage with people in a prolonged period of time is really an opportunity and a possibility to engage. And again, I talk a lot about transformation. I think one of the things that have appeared as a key theme after the pandemic is obviously that I think a lot of us woke up to the fact that the best things in life aren't things. So we are looking for experiences, and especially when we're traveling. Our minds are open. We want to experience new stuff. We're excited. So yes. For retailers, that's an opportunity not to just present products, but to create something that's a little bit bigger than that. where I get into a universe where I get to experience other things. A lot of people there is also in a sort of souvenir mindset. If they had whether you're a business traveler or whether you're there on holiday, what are the things you're going to bring home? When your travel retail experience feels more or less the same wherever you are, when it's not differentiated, um, when it doesn't bring a lot of the sort of local community feel into the airport, it's just like being in a worldwide McDonald's. And and if we look at how some of those bigger retail chains, as Starbucks, I think Starbucks is a brilliant example of that, where Starbucks actually came from being that little local community store, and then they became a multinational big brand that became very, very mainstream and singular in the experience. Now they're rolling back again and thinking, maybe we forgot that past where people actually want to have that more local connection, that community connection. So I think there's a massive opportunity for retailers today to reinvent that in the product offering, in your in-store shopping experience. And by the end of the day, I mean, it's not really different from we see in your everyday supermarket and the pivoted products that we see in there, where they are thinking about how can we support small community farmers, how can we support craft makers in our local communities. And I think, yes, if you're in an airport and you want to deliver that exceptional experience, give people that little souvenir, maybe that's a good place to start.
Well, precious few airports actually do that, and what they do when they do get more focused on things that are essentially local, it's more tokenism than anything else. It's there because they have to be seen to be doing something rather than try and embrace a whole new opportunity there. I think that's what's essentially missing. And curiously, equally, the brands would like to be more active, would like to do things that are offer a different experience, that reimagine the airport environment. But it's just, the retailers really don't come out to play in that respect. It just doesn't happen.
No, and again, I mean, I think there's generally a challenge in the way that we view retail and shopping in general. I mean, if you look at how we have structured our cities are made for one thing, and that's basically shopping. So if you don't have money, there's no experience for you. And again, I think smarter cities now, or most city planners today, are looking at us people who live there, more wholesome citizens. So providing opportunities to exercise. So urban gyms are popping up everywhere. This notion of maybe it's great to have green spaces. Maybe it's great to be close to water, to the sea. And I think again for airports, if they can change away their mindset from let's just see how we can squeeze out every little dollar as soon as they touch down, to actually start thinking about what actually does provide value. How can the airport be part of what people need? And a lot of us, we might need relaxation. We might need an opportunity to connect with our loved ones. We might want to bring something back. All of these things are very much about helping us on our journey. And one of the key things that I tend to say to brands is step back and put yourself in people's feet and ask, who can you help people become? How can you create transformation experience when you have them there that gives them better health, that adds to inspiring to sustainable living, whatever it might be. And obviously it puts a lot of pressure on retailers. But the other thing is, as you mentioned, is in fact that, because these are the people I advise on a daily basis, a lot of the brands out there, whether you are the Pernod Ricards of this world, wherever you are, even a lot of the big cosmetic companies today, are waking up to this call and want to push, want to rethink, want to redo, and how can that be done in collaboration? How can how can airports in the simple way they are actually work as a little petri dish for a new way of looking at sustainable consumption, a new way of traveling.
Well, sadly, as we've already said, it is a real slow burn at airports. And it takes us nicely into kind of the next question, which is what does it actually take for any organization or company to accelerate its pace? I mean, who needs to own sustainability? And the pivot always seems to be how to implement sustainable actions without compromising the growth or future viability of a business and its needs. In short, how can you do good if you're not doing well financially?
You know what? Obviously, as I said in the beginning, there's tremendous pressure on airports, retailers, airlines. So step one is obviously getting your house in order. It is thinking about how you can improve, and it takes time. Being honest about that, you're trying to change course of an oil tanker. That's going to take time. But the real pivot needs to happen in terms of thinking about this not just as a responsibility. Because if you go into this just saying, oh, we ought to do this, if you don't look at this as an opportunity, then you're going to miss out on it. I mean, because across all these big topics around sustainability, there's a massive opportunity. I mean, if you take some of the social possibilities, 10% of people in the world are disabled in one way or another. Massive market for an airport to cater to those people, to make sure that they have a great experience, to make sure that you cater to their needs. That's one thing. On the sustainability side of things, we know that people are looking for more sustainable products. Obviously, you need to live up to price, convenience, some of these things. But if you can push that agenda, you're already differentiating yourself tremendously. And at the moment, I think it's different from our parents' generations, where travel was, the rare thing. All of us travel a lot, and probably more than we should. So just in that competition between airports, between what do you want to choose as your hub, where you might be competing against Istanbul, Dubai, Heathrow. So what's your little stopover thing? And that context, it becomes even more important to create a much more wholesome model for that experience. So I do still see sustainability as an opportunity, especially as it is right now in travel retail and with airlines. Whereas if we look to other industries, it's become a very, very competitive market, and it's very, very difficult to differentiate. It's very, very difficult to get that edge. So actually, I think if we look at the industry, there is an opportunity right now for the ones who wants to own that, who wants to drive that. Because when you ask me, so what airlines are actually doing good in this space, for example? I mean, at the moment, unfortunately, it almost comes down to who can pack the most passengers. Obviously, the more passengers you stack into an airline, the more sustainable it is. But that's only looking at one part of that equation, carbon emissions per passenger. But it's much more complicated than just that. So it is about those programs, and it's about also opening up. I mean, one thing I love is really this idea about giving people more choice. Because we all travel, differently. Someone love the middle seat, aisle, window, says a lot about us, how social we are, our feelings. And so I think the real opportunity here is also not just to look at us as sort of cattle that just needs to go from A to B, but actually open up for that diversity. And that comes with sustainability as well. That, you know, some of us are more light green, some of us are more dark green, more activist. So give people that plethora of options, and maybe people want to pay a little bit more for that extra thing. So I think this is still early days. This is a journey, but I think the biggest risk is not to take this seriously right now, because this is moving fast, and if you get this wrong, you miss the bigger opportunity and the possibility, and maybe fall behind.